welcome to another episode of Cheap Smut. My name is Katie Mizell.
And my name is Carl Mizell.
And welcome to our fourth author profile featuring the fantastic Opal Reyne, all the way from Australia. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Well,
Yes.
howdy, mate.
Thank you for joining us. For those of you who might not be familiar, Opal Reyne is an Australian author of adult paranormal and monster romances, and she is best known for her Duskwalker Brides series, which features a lot of skull-headed monsters.
Yes.
Which we are big fans of. And I just want to pull back the curtain for the listeners real quick. This is the craziest thing we've ever done because you are in the future, functionally, for us. It is roughly noon on a Wednesday in Australia, and it is 9 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Michigan, America, USA.
America, USA.
I'm very, very in the future.
Yeah. You are. What's it like out there?
It's fun.
Roughly the same.
It can be. It is what it is. It's Australia. It's full of spiders and everything wants to kill us. But today's actually a pretty special day. I actually didn't think about it until I booked it. But today's my birthday.
No way!
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I didn't
Happy
even
birthday.
realize when I booked.
Oh, well, we will keep it super light and super brief for you. I remember when we were setting this up, you had mentioned that you were having a friend come in and you were approaching a birthday. So we're honored, and hopefully we can make this entertaining for you.
Yeah.
But it's just really funny because like I've had some people starting to do the whole like and then like I just know that once American time rolls over, it's just gonna flood in now, and I'm just like, okay.
You could.
That's what it's like.
I can imagine. Yeah, I am a big fan of Ringworld, the science fiction novel Ringworld by Larry Niven. And at the beginning of the book, the character wants to keep celebrating his 200th birthday, so he keeps going. He parties until 11:59 p.m. and then he jumps in a teleporter to go back an hour in a different time zone. And so he just you could do that. I mean, you're in the future.
It's like celebrating for a little bit longer. Yeah, that's
exactly.
What it's like. That time zone difference really makes a difference on stuff like that because like different dates. So
right.
Yeah.
I know. I remember. I was so meticulous. I learned a lot about Australian time zones setting this up. I learned that you guys have some time zones that are only 30 minutes apart, and then there's one time zone. I believe it's called Lord Howe. That's just this one little pocket down there, and I think
I have no idea.
There you go. I was just fascinated.
It's weird too, because like I just moved from Sydney, which is about 9.5 hours south, and they have daylight savings, but up here in Queensland they don't. And so like I'm so used to it just changing, and it didn't change, and so now everyone is an hour behind me, and I'm like I'm even more in the future.
That's so wild.
Yeah, we had the same thing here. There, like the state of Arizona doesn't honor it. But then there's a county that does. But then within that county, there's an Indigenous Peoples Reservation that does not. So depending on where you go, it gets crazy. But you didn't join us to talk about time. You joined us to talk about smut, specifically the smut that you write. I hope you don't mind that. We don't use it as a pejorative around here.
No, that's okay.
Okay, excellent. The central conceit of the show is that we like to read inexpensive, or she reads inexpensive, cheap novels, $4.99 or less, and comes on and explains it to me. And so the Duskwalker Bride series, that was the first introduction that we had to you. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the first introduction that pretty much everybody who knows you had to you. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. About 1% know me through my other books, but yeah.
Yeah. And refresh our memories. So you have the Duskwalker Bride series, and then what is your other series?
So I also have the Witchbound series, which features like dragon and witch pairings. But what makes it special is that the dragons can change like interchangeably to a human form and a dragon form, but they can also change their size. And so they go from gigantic to tiny, which means that they do, in fact, fuck in their dragon form.
Well, what's the point of being a dragon?
Oh my goodness!
Right?
I love dragon books. I haven't read a dragon book in a long time. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
There you go.
Yeah, think like Smog, but like good enough to fit between your thighs.
Oh my god! I love it.
Smog, but fucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smog, but fuck a bull.
Fuck a bull.
Yeah. But yeah, so I have that, and then I also have a pirate romance zoology, which doesn't really feature any fantasy, but it's like modern writing style, but historic. So instead of being like he ripped open her blouse and her bosom fell out, it's more like he fucked her tits and ass. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
I want to preemptively give a bit of a shout out to Kaya Carrington Russell. I mentioned before we started recording, in advance of this conversation, I went and listened to that conversation, and she had a lot of great questions that I wanted to sort of maybe expand upon and that sort of thing. So thank you, Kaya, if you're hearing this, for asking such great questions. But something you said during that conversation that I thought was fascinating was that you mentioned early on in your career that you had a couple of books that you had released and then just took off the market. They're gone. You don't have to talk about it. But could you sort of, one thing that we're fascinated with here is the autonomy of art. Like once you put it out in the world, there's no way to gauge the response to it. But this is the reverse. You took it off the market. Would you mind talking a little bit about the mindset behind that?
so every author's journey is very different, and some of it is not easy for everyone. I'll preemptive and say this that I grew up rather poor. I didn't have a lot of money, and so I was trying as hard as I can to pay for editors within my budget. And so I wrote a book. I wrote a few books, and I got them edited, and then that wasn't enough. And so I then literally scrounged all of my cash together, worked a lot of overtime doing very physically intensive, laborious jobs to pay for another editor who once again didn't do well. And then by the fourth editor, I gave up.
Yeah.
After A Soul to Keep came out, I was so disheartened by that point, by the series and just the constant negative editorial reviews that I had, no matter of the fact that I had hired four people for it. I had to give up. I just went, I don't have the time, the energy, or the mind frame right now to sit there with those books and pour myself into them because I've lost my passion and my spark for them. And so like I would have had to go over them again with what I had already learned, and then I would have to then go and once again pay for another editor. And my process is now very different. Like I was on my own. I didn't have any author friends. I didn't have any reader friends. I just went, I wrote this book and I need to get it out. And so I was very, very much on my own. And so yeah, I just decided once The Soul to Keep came out and it started doing well, I was like, I'm just gonna pull them off. I'm gonna pull them off. Maybe one day I'll get back to them. But like I said, I have unfortunately lost my spark for that series, which means I even have like the fifth book written of that series. And the idea of sitting down with them now, I'm just like, I don't know if I can. So, and I didn't want readers to go back and read that and judge me for that, because editing is not an author's fault. People seem to think it is. It is when we don't go out and try and get one and we think we can do it ourselves. But when we are actively trying to get them edited within our budgets as best as we can, and we get hit hard for it, it really hurts because like you're trying your hardest. And so I didn't want readers to go back, read my Adeus Chronicles just to judge me for that, because it's not my fault. I tried as hard as I can within my budget. Sure, it is my fault in the terms of like I could have just saved a little bit more and gone out. But the biggest thing is that I'm not an editor. And so like I read over all of my books after they were edited and I thought they were great. I was like, yay, they look amazing. I didn't see any like major mistakes. I was like, cool, I can deal with that. But no, apparently crawling with them. And like, I didn't know that because like I said, I'm not an editor. So.
Right. You also mentioned in that interview, your first drafts are just almost quite literally word vomit. Like, you said something that I thought was great was 100 bad words is better than 0 words on the page. Have you ever gone back now that you basically edit yourself? Have you ever gone back and read the first draft and been completely unable to figure out what you meant in a sentence?
So my process generally for me is I do 2 rounds of edits now because I'm a little bit more experienced, but it used to be 3. But yeah, so the first round is me just, like I said, word vomit, just like get it out. Like, doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad, just get it onto the paper. And then I do my first round of editing. And then the number of times I've sat there going, I don't even know what I was trying to say. You know, it's
fucking
bad.
beautiful.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then by that point, that's the point where I start like deleting stuff. I'm like, oh, I just went on a tangent here, and like that's a rant, and like I don't know if I want that anymore. And I start polishing, and then by the last time, I'm like, okay, everything should make sense now. Let's just see how much I can fancy it up.
Yeah. I meant to the series that we were talking about earlier. You actually you kind of led me right to this question, which is there any chance? And you said you've kind of lost your spark for that series right now, so you're leaving it on the back burner. But is there any chance we're going to get sort of like a Taylor Swift era's version, like an updated Opal's version of these books? Now that you're from a new perspective, because you are on that writer's journey and you change. If you were the same writer at the end of your career as you were at the beginning of your career, you probably didn't have much of a career. I would, So is there any chance that the readers will get to see that one day?
Maybe. Like
Okay.
I still have them. I still have them. I would like I said, I'm a bit tired and hurt by it, but I think maybe in like 10 years I might just go, oh, screw it, I'm going to bring it back, and like I'll be able to have a fresh set of eyes and a fresh mind, and I can go in and make that book what it was supposed to be, and then I can send it to my editor and proofreader and betas and just be like, please, it's all yours now, fix it. Fix once I've fixed it. Like I'll have to go through and change a bit of the story and all that kind of stuff, and then just be like, you take it from me. I can't look at it anymore.
Yeah. And maybe something will come along that'll strike that spark. And what I found fascinating when I was doing a little bit of research for this was your diverse interests, your diverse backgrounds. You are a massive anime fan. I am an extreme weeb. I've said this before. I'm 45. I'm 45 years old. So when I was in the age where anime would have probably hit the first time, it was completely inaccessible here in America. And I was really interested. You mentioned that you had pulled a little bit of inspiration from the ancient Magus Bride, specifically the character Elias. And then as soon as I saw the character, I was like, oh, that's Orpheus. That's a Mavka. It looked, and I know the Mavkas look different and whatnot. And you have talked about pulling inspiration from a variety of places, but is there anything sitting in one of your books that somebody might be surprised to be like, oh, I didn't realize that she took inspiration from this thing and put it in this book, like sort of almost like an Easter egg? Is there anything in there that might surprise an avid Opal Reyne reader?
I really loved Demon Slayer as well.
Okay.
And I really liked the concept that the sun burnt them in Demon Slayer. Of course, my demons are very different, especially because like the ones in Demon Slayer, half of them are actually really attractive, and I'm sitting there like curling my hair. They're the bad guy. Like we always love a villain.
I couldn't hurt you.
But yeah, so there's like little stuff like that. If we're going outside of anime, like there's like quite a few animes that have like inspired me as well, but they're more on a smaller scale. Like I really like Magic Circles, which is in a lot of anime, and visually I see that in my head when I write. But a big one would be in every book I have about 4 or 5 lines of songs just scattered all throughout the books. And like there's a few of Bad Omens, there's a few of Sleep Token, Parkway Drive. Yeah, and then there's like everyone's favorite line, which is "Let Me Melt Your Heart," is actually from Madonna, but it's a Sick Kick remix, which is like Frozen, and so that's where my brain instantly got that. And then I really like what's that song? Oh, God, I can't remember the song, but yeah, it's that one I listened to all the way through. A Soul to Keep. I'll see if I can quickly find it.
That's
And yeah.
fascinating, though. Well, while you're doing that, you actually taught me
Scavenger
something.
hunt.
What's that?
It's like a scavenger hunt inside a book now. for me.
Exactly.
I love that.
I discovered an entirely new genre of music thanks to you, and that is funk.
Yes, I love funk.
I saw that in your bio on your website, and I'm a musician myself, a huge music nerd. And I went digging for it, and that is some extremely my kind of shit right there.
Right?
So if nothing else, thank you for that. I definitely can see, because you're also a big fan of slowed down covers or slowed down versions of songs, and I think funk is basically, sort of from what I gleaned, the origins of the old chopped and screwed sort of deep South hip hop from the early aughts here in America. For those of you not familiar, so thank you for that, for introducing me to that. Did you find the song that you were looking for?
I did. Middle of the Night by, oh God, I'm not even going to try her name. L-I, no, I can't say the last name. Starts with a D. It's got like a pretty little accent in it, and I'm not going to try that. I'll just brutalize it. But
is that the one that got covered by Loveless on TikTok?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. I like that song.
Yeah,
it's a really nice song. Yeah,
right. And I listened to A Soul to Keep for that. But Sleep Talk at the moment, Bad Omens for a while. I think that was A Soul to Heal and A Soul to Touch. And then Sleep Token has just absolutely gotten me from A Soul to Touch onwards. Just constant. Sleep Token.
No.
Sorry.
I had only heard of Sleep Token, and I was watching a video because you mentioned it in the interview with Kaya, and you came around the stairs. You were getting ready to take the kids up for bath, and you're like, "Oh, is that Sleep Token?"
Yeah, I know Sleep Token.
Is that your shit?
I'm not under a rock. It's I'm still exploring their discography.
Yeah,
they had a very popular 15-20 second sound on TikTok, which is fantastic because it's like a teeny tiny sample of their best work, and then you can dive in and find what you like. And what you were playing was the most popular stuff they have. So I was like, oh, that I know. That's Sleep Token. And that's Sleep Token from TikTok. So
yeah, if you were to look at the bar on YouTube, it was easily the most replayed moment. Is there something about... I mean, Orpheus has the skull head. Sleep Token is all masked. Is that something that resonates with you on a creative level?
I do like the masking, because I plan to have some mask-related monsters in the future. But no, the lyrics for me and just his voice is just what get me. Like, for me, a really good artist will hit me by their lyrics, and it could just be the smallest snippet in a song, and I can hate the absolute rest of the song, but if that snippet catches me, I'll listen. I'll find a way, or on YouTube I'll find a way to just play that snippet on repeat. And once my brain falls in love with a song, I have a tendency to listen to it obsessively, like over and over. And so there's been quite a few number of Sleep Token and Bad Omens songs where I've listened to them about 8 hours on repeat, just the one song during a writing session. And then I might switch over to something really strange afterwards. A good example is last night I was writing and I was listening to Sleep Token slowed. And then I went, screw this, and I went to Beauty and the Beast, their intro song to the movie, the harp version only, like just a harp cover and that on repeat, because I needed something completely different, and sometimes I need wordless, and yeah, so... their music really resonates with me, and Vessel's voice really resonates with my ears. So
I love it. I love talking about feeling music. I've recently, there's a great band called Chick Chick Chick. It's 3 exclamation points, but it's pronounced Chick Chick Chick. And I'm the same way. I can latch onto a certain lyric and want to listen to the whole song over and over again. And so I've been listening to their song "Must Be the Moon," and it's a line about going out and having a lousy hookup. But there's a line that says, "You could blame it on the music, but that wouldn't be right, because I've gotten lucky to some pretty bad tunes. It must be the moon." And I think that is such that line. There's so much going on in that line that I just want to listen to it constantly, nonstop. Speaking of that, in sort of a roundabout way, one thing that Katie and I talk about a lot is genres. Romance, you can't just call it romance. It's genres and subgenres and microgenres, and it feels like romance lends itself well to that sort of symbiotic relationship with a bunch of different tropes, and your books touch on a variety of tropes. So do you have any thoughts on what it is about romance that lends itself well to being almost like a universal solvent, like it goes well with everything?
Well, romance is in everything. And I mean that both platonically and of course desire and amorously, if that's a word, don't mind me. But like passion is what drives us. Passion is what gets us up out of the bed in the morning. And you can attach that passion to anything, that inspiration to anything. And it's a form of love. Like I love my phone. You know what I mean? Like I can have a romance with my phone, and I can have a romance with books, and I can have a romance with a sport, and I can have a romance with music. And that's what's the glue, because we have that and we experience that in almost anything that we do in life. Like, you can have it with the most randomest of things, like going out for a walk. You can be in love with that, and so therefore you got hiking tropes. You can put it anywhere, and that's why, because it's a passion driven. It's not just love and body and two people. It's them plus their interests, and that's what ties. Because you can't have two characters that can't get along. They need some form of connection, and whatever that connection may be is the external love to their internal love.
I had a hunch you were going to give us a great answer, and you knocked it right out of the park. That's deep. Because I think you're like, no, but seriously, like the notion, the word romance or romantic gets thrown around, and it seems to be only applied to, like you said, like, amorous love, romance, but like the romantic notion that you can romanticize things. Like there are certain things, like I do love walking my dog and putting on the headphones and getting lost for a little bit. And what am I going to see? What am I going to explore? And then maybe the song comes on, and all of a sudden you're transported to a different place or a different time. And so I appreciate that. One thing you said while talking to Kai that piggybacks off this really well, that I thought was fascinating, was your distinction between dark romance versus romance with dark themes.
Yeah.
And that is something that we've talked about. Katie is obviously the smut reader in this dynamic. Not a big dark romance fan, correct?
It's not that I'm not a fan. It's that I generally don't tend to seek it out. But I've read several dark romances that I also love.
Right. But you do sort of perk up when you get your romance with dark themes.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I do. I love a good romance with dark themes. I love anything with dark themes because it touches my little emo heart.
Yeah.
I'm still that same, 15-year-old girl and thrashing out to My Chemical Romance inside my head.
Absolutely. Would you mind just sort of kind of elaborating on that? Because I think that's a point that I would like as many listeners to hear as possible.
Yeah, so for me, how I see dark romance versus dark themes in a romance is that dark romance is the romance between the two characters is dark. So there's a lot of abuse. There's some of it consensually, some of it not. And they touch on those sort of darker kinks. Like we're going into like rape kinks, we're going into blood kinks, we're going into somnophilia, which is where one person is asleep and is not aware. And so that is darkness within the romance, the internal romance that is happening. Whereas dark themes is external things. So there could be touches of darkness between the two characters, but it's external. So the female or the male character, whichever, they could have experienced rape or abuse or domestic violence from outside, but they're not receiving it from their partner. And that's the difference, is like you have that dark theme still, but it's not coming from the person that's meant to be the love interest. And that to me is the biggest difference, because like a perfect example relating them to my novels is that people like to think of my Duskwalkers as a dark romance because they're monsters and they eat humans and stuff like that. But my Duskwalkers, despite them being a very big entity for darkness, are not negative, cruel. They accidentally try to eat their partner, but they don't want to. They don't want to harm them. And that's the big distinction there. And that's why I have dark themes, but not a dark romance. That's a good example of it.
I was going to say, the Duskwalkers are mostly sweet babies.
Yeah, we stand a sweet cinnamon roll of a Duskwalker here in Orpheus. We did 3 episodes on one of your books because the world building and the density that you pack into that is really fascinating. is that something that you intended to happen, or is that something that just sort of, as the books came out of you, you found yourself? Because like if you go to your website, there are very detailed notes about the world and the Mavka and what they do and who they are. Was that an extension of what you like in your books, in your media, or was it something that just sort of happened on its own?
I think for me, I'm a very visual person. There's this scale, I can't remember what the scale is called, but basically it's the different way you imagine things. And some people can see an apple for being really solid, and some people can't see anything at all. In the same way that some people, when they look at words, they can hallucinate the story in their head, and other people just see words. And for me, I am very much on the 5 scale. I can see it, I can taste it, I can smell it. And when I started writing, I had like the plot points for the story. I needed it all to make sense. I try to avoid as many loopholes and like plot holes as I can. And I try to make it all make sense so that the readers aren't left with questions. Like a good example of that, which we can talk about later, which you guys are going to giggle about. But my Duskwalkers are 7 feet tall. Right, and the brides are mainly between 5'1" and 5'7". I didn't want them to have porta pussies, so I was like, it has to make sense. It has to make sense. It has to make sense as to why this gigantic thing can fit inside. And so I did the spell, and like that's a part of that world building that just brings on that little bit of extra detail. And then I started doing that for the entire story, and so I just kept adding detail and going deeper and deeper into that background and into the world building. And every author, I think most authors have that, but their not ability but desire to lay that all down in words for their reader sometimes doesn't always happen. Whereas for me, I'm a big book girl. My books are chunky, like they're all way over the norm for word count, and like I squish them all in, but I had to get them out. And then I just went, if nobody wants to read these giant books because of my world building, then so be it, but people like it, and so that's a good thing for me. But yeah, for me, that's why I put it all in there, is because I wanted it to make sense, and I wanted there to be not so many questions. You know what I mean? I wanted people to be able to have questions and be excited for the next books, and that's why I tend to have like little drops of like spoilers that tease for the next books, but I don't like to lay it all out and just like, this is the story and here's a whole bunch of word vomit that's just too much to digest. I try to sprinkle it in throughout the whole series, and that's what the series is doing. It's building. It's building and it's building, and we're getting bigger and bigger, and depending on how far people are into, every book has a different aspect. Like Assault to Keep is the introduction, so it's a lot more info dumping in some way, because we have to quickly learn about the demons. We have to quickly learn about Duskwalkers. We've got to go back to the fact that the world is semi-stuck in the 1700s, despite it being in the 2000s, like 2020s, which is what its time frame is. So they're classified technically as dystopian because of that, but I ignore that and just go fantasy. So I have to go through all of that, explain the magical aspects, and really introduce the series, which is why I have the prologue the way I've written it, which is, some people don't like that prologue style, but it's such a big world and there's so much more going on later that I would have had to sprinkle that in and just stop you from reading. I'd rather just get it out of the way. But in book 2, we get a little bit more of the Dustwalkers and the demons and the Demon King, but we also then have the pregnancy trope. And a lot of people hate the pregnancy trope, and I understand why, but the reason why I have it in this book in the way that I've written it is simply because you cannot learn about the Mavka or Duskwalkers any other way, because they have no idea. They forget everything. And so they can't be like, this is how a baby is formed for us. Instead, we get to visually see how that happens. And that's a part of that world building. That's what the pregnancy trope is in Assault to Heal. And then Touch, we move on to the human aspect of things and the Demon Slayer act of things. And then in Guide, we go into the elves and we touch more on what they're like. And then we go into Assault to Revive, which is even more into the Demon Slayers and stuff. But each book is building the series, and each book is giving you that information, but on a slower arc. yeah, that's how it ended up being.
No, it's great. You mentioned the spell in order to facilitate make Raya's well, for lack of a better term, a TARDIS, or vagina a TARDIS. Make it bigger on the inside. And I actually just went back and revisited that episode this week. We pull a clip from the vault every week, and in honor of talking to you this week, I went back and pulled the clip where Katie explained that to me. And we've done almost 40 episodes of this show now, and I still haven't heard anything quite like casting a magical spell to make a giant penis fit inside a normal human-sized vagina.
Yep.
But since we brought it
Should
up...
have been poking her in the heart.
Right? Seriously. Since we brought it up and we talked about it off pod here, what goes into designing a monster dick? Like because that's one of the things we talk about on the show is the creativity, not just in the books, but specifically in some of these dicks. So when you're setting out to create this comically large but accurate, I would argue, he's 7'2", he's a large creature. What goes into that? Like, did you ever have a point where you were like, no, that's too unrealistic, that's too this, that needs more girth? Like, what's the process here?
So it was really funny when I was writing A Soul to Keep, and I came up to having to describe what his dick would look like. I sat there, I shit you not, with my elbows on the table, my hands like together, and like tapping my chin, and the thought that went in my head was, how fucked up can I make it?
Oh, that is the best thing I've ever heard.
Mission fucking accomplished.
Yes. Oh my
Right?
God. How can I? Yes. We should always be shooting for the stars like that.
Right? And so it started off with the dick being just big, and then I was like, well, their blood is purple, so you got to make it purple. I wanted, because I knew I was going to do some really weird stuff with their dicks. I did not want to make their blood red, and I didn't want to make their dicks red because I didn't want to give them red rockets. It's that deviation from that, because so I went purple. And then with Orpheus, I was like, well, he's got fish fins hanging from his arms, so screw it, he can fish fins going up his penis. And then I really like the idea of that deep groove, because that can be a tool. It can be a clit stimulator. It can really squish into certain places. It's a nice little sort of thing, but it has a later function that you'll discover in a book that's not even out yet.
Yes.
So it actually has a function. There's something for it, which will be explained later. But then with
I love that.
And then with the tentacles, they have multiple. I like things to have a reason. You know what I mean? So the tentacles, I was like, I can't just give him tentacles and not explain as to why he'd have them. And so they have two functions. One is to stop them, like when they start getting erected, to stop them from actually extruding. So like they hold on and they latch down, and they also protect so that they don't dry out, because if they dry out, it starts to hurt, bringing on a little bit of emergency to certain situations. But the other one is I don't know if reverse is the right word, but it's all I can think of. It's a reverse way to knot. It's a latch. So when he comes, they can't get away. So that's what they're...
I told you that.
Yeah, you did, but I didn't think of it as... I learned about knots on this show, too.
Yeah, he did.
So I was like, oh, I understand that reference. But that's fascinating, because I'm glad you said that, because for me personally, the idea of tentacles anywhere near anyone's bits is off-putting, but they're functional, and I appreciate functionality.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, when I told you that they were for holding on to her thighs and keeping her attached, you were like, that's what your hands are for, Orpheus.
Yeah.
That's what your hands are for.
I mean, but again, I'm applying my weak, basic human
logic,
standards to a 7'2" Duskwalker named Orpheus, and we named the other one Tom.
We did. His name is Magnar.
Yeah, his name is Magnar. We didn't have a name for him at that point. We called him Tom.
Yeah, it's over the other Magva, the other Mavka, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You touched on it earlier. You said that, like, kind of when you were first putting your books out into the world, you didn't have a lot of author friends. and now you're starting to develop those relationships. Could you speak to the sort of interesting dynamic between the value of having a circle of like-minded creatives, other authors, despite the writing being a very solitary act?
So sometimes you need people to have fun with. You need people in your corner that are going to be there when you have a good release and when you get that little orange banner on Amazon, and you need them there to just keep you pushing some days. But they also bring fun to a solitary task, because the amount of times that I've just gone, Lord, send me some help because I need it, and just explode about the fact that my book is just being an absolute pain in the dick to write. And so like I get so frustrated with my book, and everyone feels that way, and like we complain about the scenes that are really hard to get out, and we complain about the things that no one else can understand. You know, I have a partner, I have my parents, I have best friends, I have all that, and they're not in the author world, and so their solution for something can sometimes be very simple, but unfortunately it's not a simple solution to a problem that's wider. You know, like, if I say I have a problem with a scene, like my friend will be like, well, why don't you just not write that scene? And it's like, because the scene is integral to the story. It's just, it's being a pain, you know what I mean? And so like having that relationship is really good, to be able to have that like-minded, relationships. And like Kaya, who interviewed me, is someone that I met earlier this year when I went to an event, and her and I have become best friends. I ended up moving from Sydney to Queensland, and she already lives here. She ended up being 15 minutes from the house I ended up choosing. And so like now having a physical friend to do that with, I had a day, I was really struggling to write. I felt very alone, like very alone. And my partner was away, and so I just went, please, can we go for lunch? And like we just sat there and complained about our books, and it was so therapeutic for my soul that I was able to come home and just knock out a couple of thousand words. And that's what you really need. You need someone who can be with you, but there has to be an insane amount of trust with some people. So it's very. Absolutely. It can be hard in that sense, because like you got to put your feelers out, and sometimes you don't always jive with someone. It's not in a negative way. Like there's some authors that like I've tried to reach out with, and they haven't wanted to clutch back, and which is absolutely fine. And I still adore their books, and I still push their books out, and I put them in my newsletters, even though I've gotten that response. So it's also taking into consideration everyone's different. Like I'm an ambivert. I explained that earlier before we started, but I'm an ambivert. So I'm an introverted extrovert, and so most authors are introverted. So I understand that I can come off quite abrasively. So I don't put it against anyone if they don't jive with me, because I'm abrasive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've never used the term ambivert. I would say that as well, because if you knew me and I said that I was introverted, you wouldn't know that. But I have to be very cautious. I'm a 6'2", big bald guy covered in tattoos. I have to be careful of how I'm coming across, so I can't come in hot a lot of times. So I have to be very, very delicate with that. Another thing that you talked about that I'd like to discuss here is your work experience prior to becoming, a full-time author, and how that helped you navigate the business side of things. And so I was wondering. One thing in particular you talked about, Katie and I come from a theater background. We were actors at one point in our life. And people loved to tell us, oh, it's great exposure, which is another way for saying, I don't want to pay you. But there is value in getting that exposure. So could you, for an author, and you talked about, this is my starting price for a new author, and this is, as I get a little bit bigger, I'm going to move my price up to this. Could you, in your own words, describe the difference, in your opinion, between working for exposure and working for free? Like, where do you draw that line?
It really depends. So like I have accepted exposure from people who are very small followings, and really the exposure is in reverse. They get exposure from me instead. And I think it really comes down to, for me personally, it's the response I get from the person. If they've come across really sweet, really lovely, I am happy to help and assist. And it's very hard, because there is a value in working for exposure, and there is free exposure. Like you've got, if I was to send a PR package to a large TikToker, you know what I mean? Like that would be free exposure for me, and they may have a much bigger following for me than me, which would be amazing. But when it comes to being paid, that's what feeds your family. That's
Right.
what clothes you. That's what keeps you being able to write and or work or do whatever it is that you need to do without needing to go to get a second job. Run yourself ragged until you can't produce work anymore or your stresses are too high. Um, a perfect example of this is I work with quite a few artists, and I try to find little hidden gems if I can, because I want to see them do well. And I've picked up a few artists who I've had to tell them that they need to increase their prices.
Hmm.
I've told, and they're like, oh, but you did this for me, you gave me great exposure. And it's like, that's great. That's not what puts food on your table. I don't mind paying more because that means that you'll be one, less stressed, two, you'll be healthier, and you'll have a healthier work-life social balance because people forget that being social in some form is part of your job. It's a part of your life. And so if you're not social in some form, your work life will not go well. Your home life will not go well. You need a balanced life. And if
Right.
you are trying to work for pennies, so, and a lot of exposure comes from that, like you end up working for pennies if you do too much exposure. And so if you're working for pennies, going through exposure and stuff like that, you're just overworking yourself. And I think when people approach people and go, I would like to give you exposure, they have to remember that they're not the only person doing that.
Right.
That it can't just be 10 people going, yeah, we'll give you exposure, and then maybe three people paying, because that may not be enough. And like for me, I never worked in industries where exposure was a big thing for me. I worked in, like I said, physically intensive laborious jobs. I was a truck driver, I was a forklift operator, crane operator, I was a line leader on a steel manufacturing company, and the first female Australia-wide on this particular large company's factory floor. Um,
What?
yeah, and so and like for them, I started getting all of these tickets, and I started going up through the ranks, and I had all the guys going, well, why you like why how come she gets to do all that? Why is she getting paid so much? And that's because I fought for my value.
Right.
And I went, well, you can keep me, who is one of the fastest line leaders and one of the safest crane operators and forklift operators, or I can leave and go find someone who will pay me probably more than what I'm asking for. And so it's understanding your value and understanding it realistically, because some people that we don't seem to fall in a nice little going, this is what I'm worth. We either underestimate or overestimate, and you really have to do some self-analysis and a lot of research and find what that worth is, and then go for it and push. And if people won't give it to you, push them away, because they're not there to be healthy. They're not there to see you do well. They're there to see themselves do well. And that's something you have to understand with exposure. It's more about them as much as it is about you. So,
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if this is as big of an issue in the publishing world or in the world of being an author, but there's also a risk of driving down the prices because, you might say, I feel like you should pay me X amount of money. And then they're like, well, I'm just going to go get somebody else who will do it for free. So you have to find that balance between taking too much exposure and finally, like, training the people around you to actually ask to be paid every now and again, especially for indie authors. In slight pivot here, you're not just an author, you're an editor in your case. You're also your own marketing person. You seem to be pretty savvy when it comes to the business of publishing. And so I'm going to ask you a big question, and that is, Opal Reyne, you've been given a magic wand, and you can fix one thing about independent publishing with the wave of a wand. It doesn't have to be anything big, but what is just one thing that you would like to see change, especially for independent authors?
uncertainty. If I had to change anything, it would be uncertainty. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncertain if the person that you're working with is someone you can trust, or if they're the level of quality that you need, if they're going to steal your manuscript and pirate it, if Amazon's going to steal your manuscript and allow it to be pirated. You know, there's so much uncertainty that comes with being an author, and it's because you have to work with so many other people. And there's just so much that goes into it. Like, you could be slammed for the tiniest thing. You know, I could have, like, I have sensitivity readers, and I pour a lot of trying to have my healthy book. You know, I want it to be edited well. I wanted it to be proofed well. I want it to be safe and well represented for the people I'm trying to represent. You know, but I have, you know, a team, a large, I try to get a large team of different people for each book, and they could miss something, and they have, and people have tried to cancel me. And it's that uncertainty that's not fair. Like, I had someone who didn't like that I missed a trigger warning for when I brought A Soul to Revive, and they tried to slam me for it. The book had been out a week, and I asked my sensitivity readers, my editor, my betas, and I was like, trigger warnings, let's get them all. And I missed one. And I'm human. I don't have any triggers. I'm a very desensitized person due to I've dealt with a lot. And so there's always that uncertainty, and I would like to take that away, like, just from everything that I do. You know, the risk of putting it to other people's hands and not having it do well. And I'm not saying anything about the reader uncertainty, because like, that's natural, that's gonna happen. And I'm a big believer that a 1-star review can be just as powerful as a 5-star review, of course in negative ways, but like, someone could say in a 1-star review that this was too dark for them, and that can make other people go, "Ooh, yay, gimme," you know. But when it comes to the working relationships and what our platforms are going, our stuff is going on to, and what the kind of platforms are and how they operate, there's always that bit of uncertainty. You know, it's not black and white. It's a massive scale of colors, and it can be quite frightening. And as a new author, it's daunting. It's, especially when you're on your own, it's daunting. So.
Oh God, yeah, I am a firm believer that the bravest thing that you can do as a human being is create something and share it. And I mean, we think about that just talking about other people's books. You know, there have been times where we've gone back and listened to things and we're like, "Ooh, we missed that one. Let's pull that out. It doesn't make the show better. There's no need for it. So let's lose it." We are closing in towards the end of our time here, so we got about 10 minutes left in our conversation. So I wanted to start trying and maybe pepper you with some more personal questions to get to know you. We have a couple of reader questions or listener questions as well. But the first question that I have for you, I didn't want to make the call, but when I was listening to the interview with Kaya, you did personally identify as a goth.
Yeah.
So I've never had the opportunity to ask a goth this, but I've heard the goth rule is if you're getting dressed to go out, you have to stay out as long as it took you to get ready.
Well, yeah. So I have different stages of goth. I have glam goth. I have gremlin goth. And 9 times out of 10, I'll be gremlin goth, and that is me. Like, I shaved my head into a mohawk, like a seriously long mohawk, because I got so tired of just doing my hair every day. And I was like, great, if my head's shaved, I'm done for the hair, but it's the face, and then the clothing and the corsets and the 3-inch platform boots, you know. Yeah, it's, if I'm going glam goth, I want to be going out for a while. I want people to look at me and go, "Oh wow, amazing," or "Oh my God, it's a weirdo run," you know. So like, that's what I want. Whereas like my gremlin goth is like my everyday house goth, where I'm just like, I'm gonna go out. It's questionable whether or not these are my PJs. You know what I mean? So like, yeah.
I don't know. We have a chain of stores over here in America called Kohl's. It's just sort of generic, like your mom. It's just, you know, you get your Dockers, your khakis, and some Levi's. But I would love to see like the Kohl's, like just Goblin Goth section. You know, like what that would look like. Like if Kohl's tried to do Hot Topic.
Comfortable pants and T-shirts with cool bands on them.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. So I'm gonna pass the baton to you. You've got some listener questions for Opal.
I do. So we reached out to our listeners and asked if they had any questions for you, and I got a couple back, thankfully. So let's go ahead and start with listener Murphy. Would like to know about your character development process.
Oh, that's a long question. I will try to answer as quickly as possible. For me, I tend to pick 3 emotions. And they're the base of the character, and that's how I keep my characters themselves, rather than them going off on their own tangent and becoming, you know, Bob from down the road rather than who they're meant to be. And I give them three emotions, and those three emotions will drive them. And my Dustwalkers are a perfect example of that. Orpheus is sad, he is lonely, and he is broken. And there he's three striving emotions. And then he has other ones. He's hopeful as well, but that's Orpheus. And then you've got, like, for instance, Faunus, who is curious, happy, and striving to be the most annoying shit he can. Like, he just wants to be funny. He is funny, he's goofy, and that's who he is. But then he has his own issues. Ruick, for instance, from the Witch Slayer, he is hateful, he is angry, and he is stupid. And so every action that they do, I start with that base, and that base then grows them, and they can have they can have fears, and that adds to them. They can have hopes, dreams that are inside and outside their relationship, and I start I have like an interwoven sort of system of all of these things that make up a person, and I stick to them, and that's how I start.
That's fantastic.
I wanted to, don't ask Jim's question. I mean, no, ask Jim's question, but I have a note to add before you do that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good Lord. Reading over my shoulder. Okay. Let's get to the next question. Listener Lauren would like to know, if you were a Duskwalker, what would your skull be?
Oh, no. I don't know. Okay, so I love wolves, and so for ages it was a wolf skull. Orpheus's skull was basically what I wanted. But then I made Faunus, and I was like, oh, damn, he's hot. You know what I mean?
I want a hotter skull.
I think it's just
the
fact
sexier skull.
I think it's the fact that the skull is like squished. It's not as long, and then the horns really come in forward and just kind of, I don't know. Both of those, they're the two.
That's my favorite design of all of your Duskwalkers. I love the ram horns. They make everything so, I don't know, there's something about them. They're very endearing, I guess.
Yeah. Faunus is as smooth. Faunus is as smooth as his horns.
Wink. No, I wanted to preface this next question by saying I've been wondering the same exact thing.
Okay. All right. So Carl and listener Jim would like to know, have you considered taking Prince's 1984 smash hit Purple Rain and adapting it to your name? Opal Reyne. Opal Reyne. No?
No.
I've heard it.
That's a hard no.
I don't know the song very well.
That's okay.
It's fine. I should have asked you, how old are you turning today? What is your birthday?
If you don't mind divulging that.
Yeah.
10:30.
You turned 30. Awesome. I'm 35. Girl, 45. So you're the baby here.
No,
perhaps that's why the Purple Rain doesn't stick with you quite as well, because it doesn't really get me either. It's a few years before me as well. So that was just for you.
And I would fight anybody who said even an unkind word about Prince Rogers Nelson. But I've been walking around the house like humming the tune Purple Rain over and over again and like changing the words. You know, only wanna see you chatting. Something, Opal Reyne. But she's just like, please. She's gonna say the outro.
Oh my God! And that's all, folks. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Opal Reyne. Goodbye.
But that pretty much is the end of the conversation. I hope it was relatively painless for you, Opal Reyne. Thank you so much for joining us. If anybody wants to go learn more about you, they can go to your website, which I believe is just opalreyne.com. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent, Opal Reyne. Thank you so much for joining us today on our author profile.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me.